I've been trying to figure out where my phone was. Then I realized it's just under the chair, and I made Varun and Leslie, search for his life. Why do you want to go into the unexplained? So trying to figure the unexplained is, I think, represented in this picture. Nobody cares when the plane lands successfully every day, every minute, but it's only when these situations everybody recognizes the pilot and he or she becomes the hero. The whole idea of this is the whole of our medicine in the next 15-20 minutes is about starting with the tear film, optics, biomechanics, and beyond. I see a lot of people from different specialties sitting here. Unfortunately, what we have done is we have divided our branches into different areas, and we assume that the disease will also follow a pattern. And I don't think it follows any pattern. It's always a mix of everything. And that's the reason, irrespective of what Dr. Supriya or Dr. Chaitra speaks, ultimately the final goal is to find an answer to the patient. Whatever branch we are in, we still really don't have a good metrics for vision. We do not know how aberration plays an important role, and what an aging eye and a what age eye is completely different, because completely everything goes differently in these patients. So when we don't even know the metrics of vision, it's difficult to go by what is a good vision and what is not a good vision. So one of the areas of interest which all of us should try to incorporate in our practice, irrespective of the branch of specialty we practice, is optics, because the answer to everything lies with the optics. And let's look at some reason it's not coming here. Okay, let's forget that. What we really need to understand today is the quantity and the quality are two different parameters. What we look at quality is this, and what we look at quantity is this. Having a 6:3 vision but seeing like this is of no use, but you can have a 6:12, a person can still lead a normal life. We've all been seeing this photograph for many years, the circle of least confusion and how the light falls on the retina and how the person sees a crisp vision like this. It's something not made in our lab, or in our multimedia lab. It's something what is from a patient. Today's diagnostics have reached the stage where using different algorithms, you can actually recreate what we once used to see in a textbook. Virtually a textbook is coming up. What happens when a patient says that he has scatter of image is the whole of the circle of, there's no circle of least confusion out here. Everything gets completely scattered out. And that's why you have a scatter, which is like this. When I go to the vision metrics, there are multiple vision metrics we know of. But what I feel, one which everybody should know, which probably comes closest to a perfect vision metrics, is a modulation transfer function. When you look at a modulation transfer function, it's amount of contrast what the person actually has and what actually you see. That means if somebody is wearing a dark colored shirt and how much of contrast, when it passes from my tears to brain, how much of that contrast is actually broken down. And that is what is called the modulation transfer function. It's nothing but the transfer of what you have and what I actually see. And if you see from here, and if you take the same patient's image transfer, and this is the true image, and this is what probably the person is perceiving out here, you can see the loss of contrast is there. It may be in different percentages. And if you actually plot it, you get a graph, and that graph is what tells the quality of vision truly is. But the quality of vision from the tears to the optic nerve, from the optic nerve to the brain, you call it as a contrast sensitivity function. The complete function from the tears to brain is contrast sensitivity, but if you're only looking at the optical thing, then it's called the modulation transfer function. Fortunately, many of our newer machines do incorporate this MTF in their platform. Now, if I look at this, these are 3 of my fellows who had very good vision. But if the value, if you look at just look at the values out here, 30, 16, and 29. That means that you may have a 6x6 vision, but what is true quality is completely different from different individuals. So somebody who comes with a 6x6 vision and you say that I'm not happy with my vision for whatever reason, before we brush them off, before we ask them to just use a lubricant and go, it's important to know that the quality depends on multiple factors. And one of the factors is the metrics itself, what we see, may not be a true metrics of evaluation. So in this, anything more than 30 to 35 of modulation transfer function, its cycles per decade is something similar to contrast, is considered as normal. And anything less than that, that means a person with a 6/6 vision, but still having a MTF of 16 is still considered as normal because his contrast is not as great as it should be. So that is something which is extremely important in our day-to-day practice. This happens when you are using a multifocal lenses or monofocal lenses. For example, you are doing, a person comes and says that he has a 6/6 N6, but you say, the patient says that I'm not terribly happy with my left eye vision. If you just use your same metrics of measurements, you mean that your metrics of measurement is just trying to fail you here. Because if you're looking at the left eye, it's 50, so it's half of what normal should be. So what you're looking at the right eye is around 24. The patient, what he says is actually true. There is some problem with this contrast, which is picking up by here. So what I'm trying to say by this is, your measurement of vision has to change with time. We are just stuck with the same thing for a long, long time. And I think it's a time that we look something beyond that, so we get a proper assessment of the visual quality itself. And in this case, it just tells you the amount of scatter. Optical scatter index is nothing but the scatter. It also says that one eye is perfect. It is 35 is normal. It's 53. Other one is half of that. So when patient says that even if you see a 6/6 vision, but still you're not doing great, that's when you know that there's something. The other thing which is very important is for all of us is to understand the aberration, aberrometers, and applications. It's not the domain of a refractive surgeon to understand refraction. It's a domain of each one of us here, or all the persons who practice surgery in ophthalmology. The aberrations or imperfection in your optical system, I can start with your cornea, it could be internal or it could be total aberrations. Machines had a big flaw initially. The machines were not able to decide where the aberration is coming from. It used to give you a figure of 1, whatever figure, and you had to virtually decode whether it's coming from the cornea, tears, brain, or wherever. What's happening now is, they realize that it's too difficult to make any sense out of it. So you have a topography now, you have a aberrometers now, which tells you the aberration is coming from the cornea, or it's the lens, and what actually goes to the brain. This is what is actually going to the brain. So that makes a huge difference in finding the culprit, because finding a culprit or nailing a culprit is very important in these cases, because until unless you know, it's impossible to find who's at fault. For example, if a patient comes to us and says that I need a multifocal, the first question which comes to mind is she fit for a multifocal? Earlier, the only thing which was a factor is, can you pay whatever money is. Now the patient says I can pay, but you don't want to have an unhappy patient. First thing is, we as cataract surgeon, we need to know when we are solving one of these expanse cases is, the cornea plays an important role in the outcome of any cataract surgery. If your cornea is not good, the surgery is definitely not going to be good. So if you're looking at the cornea and there's absolutely no aberrations out here, it's only the lens. You can see the band out here which is creating a problem. And the same thing again, same patient may come to you with a problem on the cornea and the problem on the lens. And if you put a multifocal on this patient, is the patient who's going to be terribly unhappy with their quality of vision. This is simulated one. This is the letter E which is coming from the cornea. The lens is perfect. What the patient is actually seeing is something which is coming from the cornea. Let me just run through a few cases which is very typical, whether you do a cataract or you just come to your practice. Patient says that I have glare post my surgery, or some people just come to you and say I have just glare. My vision is great in the day, but as it goes, as the day goes, my vision becomes terribly bad. The question is, what are these curious cases? I've run through these images. I'm not going to go into them again, but they play an important role in our understanding. Because the way the light falls on the retina is also, it's a multiple factors from the tears to the brain, and that's how the images look like. That is one factor of it. But if you really look at it, if you look at this patient here, it's a very important slide for me because it unfolds a complete new understanding of a role of a pupil. This is a completely normal individual. There's absolutely no refractive error. The pupil is 2 millimeters out here, and it becomes 3. As the day goes, imagine this pupil becomes 6. At the 6 millimeter pupil, you actually have two images out there. And these two images out there create a tremendous amount of aberration, which actually causes a person to see double. Then how does it translate in real life situation? Is something like this. This is the pupil size here, and this axis is your refractive error. A person who's got a 20/20 vision, and he's got just a little bit of a, let's assume that his pupil is around 4 millimeter. He's got a 0.05 diopter on the spherical level, on the height, on the plus level. As his pupil increases to 7.5, suddenly the same patient becomes myopic. And that's because there's so much of spherical aberration in his cornea that the light is bending more forward, because spherical aberration on the cornea makes the lens to bend forward. And the same light which lens which was bending perfectly, like a circle of least confusion out here, suddenly becomes double because the entire lens, entire light is forming a two image, one a myopic image, the other one is an ametropic image. And this is exactly what happens when the people complains to you of glare. And this is actually multifold when you do a basic surgery of them, or you put a lens with the patient is not suitable. So that these patients can be actually be corrected by wavefront aberration guided treatment and virtually made perfect. And you can even correct them when they don't have any refractive error. So one of the areas when look at this, that is dropping down from a minus around 2.8 to around by 8 millimeter pupil, it becomes close to 4. And do a refractive surgery on the same patient, it completely becomes normal. So these are the ones where a wavefront guided treatment plays a tremendous important role in the refractive correction. This is a patient who had a LASIK surgery done, LASIK done with one of the new techniques called SMILE. And patient was perfectly all right, but the main complaint for him is he has double vision, diplopia, and he just cannot, he's very unhappy. And again, let's go back to the aberrometry here. The aberrometry shows that the cornea, the one which is the point of interest today, or point of interest for this patient, because where this is the one which underwent LASIK surgery is perfectly normal. But surprisingly, a 21-year-old person shows a big lens band. And you would see this kind of a band if you're 40 and you have a cataract in it, but if you see a band out here, there's something which we need to look further. And the same patient had, he had treated for a -2 6 months back, and he's got a -2 now. There's no ectasia, the cornea looks healthy. And he was said that there probably is some problem with the lenticular extraction, we may need to do a recorrection. The minute we did a cyclopen drops, he relaxed the refraction. From a -2, he became a 0.75 plus. And this is his image, and this is the difference. So one thing we need to understand is, when we don't understand how an aberration plays a role, this one case which completely unfolds an understanding that a pseudomyopia, a shift of lens, could change the entire structure of your vision. A so-called normal individual has a -2, getting back a -2 after 3 months, was supposed to go for a recorrection. What we actually found was his culprit was in lens. So this is not just refractive surgery, this could be in your normal patient. I have enough number of normal patients walk to me saying that they're just not happy with their vision. They're all, when you examine them in your room, they're perfectly normal. But the problem comes when you actually see their aberrations. And you don't need this actually. It's not that it's a must that you should do an aberrometry on them. Just doing a cycloped refraction on these kind of people, you see a shift of refractive error. And that itself will tell us that there is a problem. Coming to the last part of my talk, even though this should have been first, is the tears. And like I mentioned here, it can tell a lot of pain. But like our Snellen visual acuity charts, we're so used to studying the T-Buts and Shermans, which are the gold standard. I think it's going to be gold standard forever. However, newer diagnostics actually throws a lot of insight into our understanding of the whole format of tears. For example, we use, what I'm just showing you, is tear interferometry, which looks at the reflection of tears. I don't need to mention that there's a lot of good quality of colors out there, which means that the quality of tears is good. And if you're just looking at this, you know that there's no colors out there, there's no lipids out there. So the whole composition of tears is bad. So these are all pretty costly and very fancy tools. But however, time will come and most of these tools will be available at much lower price and it will be used by everybody so that we can assess the quality of tear film better. The tear film plays a tremendous important role in our quality of vision. It's just not the quality in the ocular health and ocular well-being, it's also the quality of vision. And a good quality of tear film actually gives quality of vision and quality of life, which is again much better than what it should be. The myography, which is where the most important factor for a good lipid, again can be evaluated today, and this is the stage of meibomian glands. And these meibomian glands, when they are not present properly, can cause a lot of problems. I have a very important person here, Dr. Henry Francis. So I think he's done a lot of work on headache, and I'm very happy that you are here. When I saw this slide, I thought of you. People who don't know him, he was our senior in St. John's, and probably an international authority. Many Indians don't know, but an international authority on headache, and comes from a very small place in Kerala. I think it's a phenomenal work you're doing when it comes to headache, and we're really proud of you. And the reason I brought this out for you is we've been studying that the aberrations in the eye could trigger migraine. That means optical aberration, which could be anything to do with the tear film itself. So this is one of the hypotheses which we worked on, because migraine trigger has to have come from somewhere. And they say that everything under the sun, including the sun, causes migraine. But we were trying to figure out everything under the sun. And one thing which was there hidden was the optical function, quality of optics. So one of the interesting paper we found was the glare or scatter of image, and how does it actually trigger. I mean, he's not mentioned about anything to do with the migraine, but it's just about this paragraph out here, which we read very carefully, which means that the thalamus is involved in the visual discomfort, and anything which causes scatter of light from the tears to the brain can trigger off any headache. And then we went back and started looking at all the migraineurs who are been suffering with migraine without much of relief. And we figured, and one of the interesting fact of this was they do have a lot of aberration and scatter, even though it should not be there. It's not that they got a basic surgery or anything done. So that is something which I feel has to be looked at. Probably you can also figure out, we have a 2 series of migraine. Tears can make a 6x6 happy to unhappy patients like this, a good quality of tears, and this is what a poor quality of tears look. This is one of our patients who had a LASIK surgery done a few years back. Extremely poor dry eye, no benefit with conventional treatment, and to an extent that her quality of life has also suffered a lot. Till that time, the myography was not clinically used, and that was this machine. We had just got the myography, and when we actually looked at the myography, we saw that this patient actually had a lot of meibomian gland dropouts. So that was one of our X-files for us, because we were able to tell the patient that the quality of meibomian glands played an important role in the quality of vision. Let's look at this video out here. As the T-bud increases or reduces, your quality of vision also changes. This is one of those patients who has a T-bud of 4 or 5, and the vision drops drastically. One of the reasons is loss of meibomian glands and extremely poor quality of tears. And I have a few slides here on cataract surgery. If you really go back and look into this, the cornea is a very mysterious surface. It's transparent, but it's mysterious by its own way. And the question we need to ask is, are cataract surgeons good enough or tuned to have this, to understand this? Multiple ways of customization from spheres, cylinders, all this we have done. But what we need to know is that there is something beyond that. To reach that final last bit of quality, what we need to do is the sphericity of the cornea or the aberrations of the cornea, because that's what makes good vision to super good vision. Because everybody can do good vision today, because I think all of us do good surgeries. But what really differentiates from one to the other is trying to understand or know these factors. Somebody said, do you think in India we need an aberrometry to see the grade of cataract? The answer is no. even a first year MBBS student, if you train him, they'll pick up cataract. The issue is not about finding the ones which are aged. Cataract is an age process. I'm talking about something which is the aging process. Aging is completely different from aged. And when you're looking at a high level of internal aberration, that means the lens is showing a change and is showing a change for worse. And these are the patients who may still complain of an unhappy vision in spite of having a near normal anatomical lens. And many times the question is asked, is my eye fit for a multifocal? Again, the question is not about the cost or the money. It's about, is your eye fit for a multifocal? It's a question which we need to answer. But many times we do not, and that's where 1 in 10 patients are not happy with the quality of vision. The second, this case, what it actually does is it tries to bring out a very important factor, the factor of knowing topography for all cataract surgeons. This patient underwent an uneventful cataract surgery. He had a toric lens implanted, but he still has 3 diopters on the day 1. It's quite embarrassing for a surgeon to have convinced the patient for a toric lens and having still not just the same but more than what he actually implanted. So the question is whether you blame the lens, the surgeon, the surgery, everything. But what you need to blame ultimately is you missed a very important factor. The surgeon probably did not do a topography for this patient. And when you see the topography, even though this is an eye which has not had any surgery done, there's something which is unusual here. There's a flat area and a steep area. And this flat and steep area actually caused that amount of a change. How does it cause amount of change? For example, this is a pupil size of 2 millimeter, and this is a 2 millimeter size. At this size, it's fairly okay, but still you see that there is 6 diopter difference in this area, which probably did not pick up during keratometry. But when you dilate the size to 3, the vision gets worse, and when it actually becomes 6 or 4 to 6, it completely reaches a stage. The patient is completely unhappy. And that's one of the reasons why I think every cataract surgeon should always plan for a topography, a good topography, before you attempt any of the premium segment lenses. This is my last case, and this case, for me also, it's one of my favorite cases because it links up everything, like what I mentioned in the beginning. She had a surgery done, and her vision, one I think was not very happy. She comes to us, she has the multifocal lenses in her eye. She comes to us saying that her eye has got scattered. A very typical complaint we see with a young patient. The question is, I'll tell you why she had early cataract. She scattered like this, something like this. And then we started looking at what are the factors. Did we miss out anything? The surgeon who did the surgery had done virtually everything, all the tests. So it was unusual for him to have missed out any factor. The corneas were normal, like I mentioned. She was perfectly fit for a multifocal. Then we sent her to a retina friends here. They said it's perfectly all right. And then we started questioning. First question was not about this light scatter. The first question was, why did she get a cataract at 21? And that was question which led us to the answer. That means you don't get a cataract at 21, a person healthy, normal individual, without any steroid or any other use. Then I did an ERG for this patient. The still answer is perfect. She had probably, I can show this to any of my residents to see what a perfect ERG is. But that's, again, we need to probe and question is what kind of a cataract is associated with the retinal problems. Okay, retinitis pigmentosa, yes, but what else? When you look at deeply, then you understand the cataract can also be associated with many of occult macular dystrophies. What she had, we operated on the left eye. What she had was a very early occult macular dystrophy. Now, question is, why did she suddenly get this problem now of glare? It's because the cataract was blocking this area. The minute you remove the cataract, the whole of this dystrophy starts beginning to show. The second question is, why is she having glare now? The answer for this, we had a neurophysician from NIMANS who gave a very interesting talk in one of the genetic conference. He said, when this ganglion cells die, they can have sparkles, people say that they have like flashes all the time. They're all the sign of it's like how the in a galaxy the cells die with a supernova, and that same kind of a feeling you can get. And this curve is actually showing progress of an occult macular dystrophy. That's why she's having that glare. The question is, why is she not having a glare in the other eye? It's because there's a cataract which is blocking. So if you remove that cataract, again she will have glare. So what sometimes seems very obvious to us as a possible answer to a question, like a glare and a multifocal, all these are very possible answers. Sometimes we have to relook at it and think, is this the right answer? In this case, what really opened our mind was probably that we just question one thing, is why did she get a cataract? So every time you question yourself differently, and you always have to think out of box to get answers to it. And what really makes a difference to us, it's about connectivity is creating things, is what the words of Steve Jobs. But what we feel is technology and innovations and your out of box thinking actually connect things. And once you connect things, I don't think there's any diagnosis which is important. Like knowing is not enough, we must apply. And every time we apply, we learn something new. And willingness is not enough, we have to do it. This is exactly what we want to give us take-home message in this talk is you have to seek, adapt, and evolve in every case you see. Thank you.